This morning, I have with me someone who is saying just that, David Cohen. He's a constitutional law professor at Drexel University. Professor, good morning to you.
Good morning.
So you wrote in Rolling Stone, let's put it up on the screen, the Second Amendment needs to be repealed because it is outdated, a threat to liberty, and a suicide pact. Now, you've laid out the argument that the Constitution has been updated several times. You've said that in the past that the Founding Fathers have made mistakes. Let me ask you this. Even some of the most ardent supporters of gun control measures don't go as far as you go. They don't go beyond the background checks and banning specific types of semi-automatic rifles. Why do you go to the repeal of the Second Amendment?
When something's written into the Constitution as a right, we elevate it in our society as something beyond the democratic process. We talk about it as a constitutional right. It's better than everything else. And I think it should be taken out of the Constitution and made just like every other consumer good. That doesn't mean I think they should be banned everywhere. It just should be subject to votes and democracy. And when we have a constitutional right, that takes it off the table.
Okay, so in this post-Second Amendment America, who then, from your perspective, has the right to own a weapon? And is it every weapon or just specific types of weapons?
Well, that's the thing. Taking it out of the Constitution doesn't answer that question. It just says, let's talk about it now, just like we talk about cars, like we talk about and think about the benefits and the risks. And sometimes that means maybe in Nebraska, we're going to have a different rule than in New York, or we might have a federal rule, but we're going to subject it to democracy. And now, to be honest, if it were up to me, I would be on the side of banning almost all guns. But I'm willing to take that to the democratic process, but not against a constitutional right. When it's a constitutional right, it takes it out of the hands of democracy and says this is off the table. And it's the only consumer good that we have that is listed in the Constitution. I think it has to go.
Which also opponents of your position would say means that it needs to be protected. But let me say this, that the Supreme Court has already spoken here through Heller and McDonald v. The city of Chicago. So that's already been spoken on by the judicial branch. But I want to hear from a former Navy SEAL on behalf of the NRA on this. This was posted to their YouTube channel just after the shooting here in Orlando. He speaks about the AR-15 specifically.
And I guarantee if the Founding Fathers had known this gun would have been invented, they wouldn't have rewritten the Second Amendment. They would have fortified it in stone. Because they knew the only way for us to stay free was by having whatever guns the bad guys have. This firearm gives average people the advantage they so desperately need and deserve to protect their life, liberty, and happiness.
Well, you say that the Founding Fathers likely made a mistake. They could not have known about these types of weapons. The former Navy SEAL there says that they would have fortified that right. What's your response to his saying that this is the only way that people stay free?
I mean, there's a cost-benefit analysis here, and some people think that guns make them safer, but I think the evidence that we've seen over the past several years with mass shootings seemingly every week of children, of churchgoers, of people out at a nightclub having fun and expressing themselves, to me that cost is too high. And I don't think the Founding Fathers had any conception of what society would be like today. And at this point in time, maybe they were right in 1791. I can't say about that. I wasn't there. But I can say that in 2016, that valuation is wrong and it needs to go. They had no sense of what society today would be like. And the Constitution allows for it to be changed, and it's time to change it.
The Constitution allows for the repeal of amendments. We saw that with the 18th and several other elements of the Constitution being changed over the past several centuries. But let me ask you this. Do you believe, and I want to know if we're having a theoretical conversation or if you actually believe that the Second Amendment can and will be repealed? Because after Sandy Hook, I mean, if the White House and those who support gun control measures couldn't get background checks, universal background checks passed after that, do you really expect that this conversation will lead to some type of repeal, some movement to repeal the Second Amendment, or is this just a theoretical conversation?
I think it can. I mean, look, if there weren't another mass shooting ever again in our history, No, I don't think anything would happen. But unfortunately, what we're seeing is that this happens time and time again with victims that just are being slaughtered. And I think that there's a majority of people in the country who feel that they are fed up, who are being silenced by the NRA, who are being silenced by those who take to the airwaves and threaten violence about guns. And I think there's a majority who would believe this. Don't get me wrong, this is difficult. The constitutional system, to amend the Constitution, it takes 2/3 of a vote in each House of Congress and then 3/4 of the states. That's difficult. But I think with enough people speaking up, enough people saying that the Constitution, this part of the Constitution is outdated, it's a threat to us, as we saw last weekend, and it's wrong.
Yeah. Well, Professor, 80 to 90%, and in some surveys more, of Americans polled say that they support universal background checks, and those haven't gone anywhere in the past several years. We'll see what the chance is for a repeal of the Second Amendment. But you at least have started this conversation. We thank you for being with us here in Newsroom. Professor David Cohen, thanks so much. And Christy, I'll send it back to you in Atlanta.
All righty.